Hello, my name is Naomi Yamakawa. I'm from Tokyo. I work for Mckinsey Company, which is a management consulting firm. So I think I'm probably the only really management consultant who does not come from a research company or is not a direct user. So you may wonder why I'm standing here. And I've also actually gotten a couple of questions over the course of the 2 days of how does a company like McKinsey actually interact with research. So just a bit of background on where my chat is going to come from is I do actually do focus groups. I don't moderate. I take a conscious choice not to moderate because I know I'm not very good as the professionals in this room. But what we have is we work with clients on topics that are strategically important to them, whether it be innovation or their brand is staggering or they want to make a leak. Brand architecture questions, whether they should reconstruct, how they should think about product innovation, but also like general, like what is the next step in the future for this company as we start going on to some commoditization in the various things and also living in the world of proliferation. I think the one angle that I may have, which is slightly different just because of my role and profession, is I tend to really hop across different topics and companies because that's what consultants do. So I have experience across a varied number of sectors, and I work in different regions. And I do have, the fortunate chance to talk with a lot of people in the C-suite, not in marketing, but sometimes in finance and et cetera. And I think the topic that I would like to share with you today, and it also covers some of the key points that was covered over the 2 days, is this whole point about research under pressure, which is time, money, but also like in terms of the stretch that we have is all of the management want to make decisions based on facts, but they don't have the time to really understand the facts. And they don't have the background that most marketers have of how to read quant research, more or less, even qualitative research. So sometimes they ask for reports and then they doubt them. I'm sure a lot of us have faced that situation. So I see really 3 key trends as I work with different types of clients surrounding consumer research today. I think all of us have mentioned huge pressure on timing. I look back in the days when I started out doing market research within McKinsey and taking on the research kind of role, is that we used to actually have a couple months to think about a whole project, and 3 months seemed short at that time. Now I'm facing situations where something is like 6 weeks end to end, from the moment the brief comes in until the moment the board has to make a very important decision because the competitor we hear is doing something new. So there's the immense time to research. Qualitative, I think a lot of the themes that we heard across today is the borderline between qualitative and quantitative is so blurred today that it's not even really worth trying to define that line. A lot of the natural language processing we saw, or the social listening, the ethnographies, but also the semiotics. Because we're doing so much at scale, it's not like an n equals 20 or 30 sample anymore. We're looking at text and images as well as human interactions in the scale of thousands, which is already, by definition, pretty quantitative. By doing this, I think there was a general discussion in all of the groups, including the roundtable yesterday, is because it is becoming easier to scale, where is the real value of the human touch of the actual researchers in the interpretation, how we read, how we train some of the machine learnings, because there is some conscious intervention that happens there. And then the last point I'm really seeing actually quite trending in the last 2 or 3 years is this whole point about this buzzword around design research and design thinking. Management is hearing about design is the next new thing, so they want to test it, but when they actually start talking about it, they often do not know what they're actually looking for, and sometimes are a bit inconfident about taking on this new leg because they grew up in an era where it was paper-based surveys or it was focus groups, and design research was less of an obvious thing. And it does tend to be more iterative because also after research happens the product development. The prototyping process has become so fast, as we heard in some of the design researchers. 3D printing, all of these other innovations have made it so easy to really just test things on the fly. But it makes it so easy that I do think some of the companies move on too fast and really do not delve onto the full value of what could be stop, think, and really digest. So this iteration speed and how you think about the sequencing or the iteration becomes more important. Just a few fact notes on the pressure of time. So it happens in all industries. For instance, in the world of RX drugs or prescriptive drugs. This is a research that McKinsey did, and we looked at drug launches in the RX for primary care across 1986 to 2012. So drug launches take a long time. If you're the first market, the chances that you will become really get a share advantage is 40%. If you're second, you're still 33%. And it dramatically drops if you're late to the market. So getting there early with the right message and grabbing the right attention is good. But even if you're first to market, if you don't have the right message, the second player still has the chance to creep up on you. I think everyone is well aware of the time constraint on the apparel industry, since Zara is 2 weeks from runway to market, right? So there is no qualitative research or quantitative research that's done, but I'm assuming there's some testing that's done before the thing actually gets launched, and they also do the prototype testing in the field as well. One thing that, as a management consultant, I'm seeing a lot is, especially in Asia, there's a lot of due diligences happening recently. Small cases to relatively large acquisitions. And the key question in the consumer industry when these due diligences and acquisitions happen is this brand worth the price? I mean, it's a very simple question. Is this brand going to grow? And what are the target customers? And what are the potential pitfalls that we need? And if it's a private equity firm, what are the interventions that are required to justify any price premium? The tricky part about due diligence is usually the average due diligence from the moment it gets announced to the bid is 4 to 6 weeks. And to try to get insights about an industry that you have no idea of, and understand and help the management team on the private equity or there's a lot of also consumer companies acquiring subcategories within them as well, to fully educate them on a brand in another country in some cases, in a category that they don't participate in, and then make the judgment decision to pay potentially millions and billions of dollars and bet a bit of their future on that company. They really need insights at speed. So everything is growing faster. It's not just us researchers that are getting pressured to do research in 2-3 weeks. The management team is even more pressured. So there's a bit of empathetic understanding I have, but it does make the work a little tough for everyone. And I know everyone in this room on the topic of qual to quant, no one can get away with writing a chart like this today, right? Like we talked to 20 groups and we found these 6 things, which is typically what I would have seen probably 10 years ago as the front page of a qual focus group anecdote. What we do see is, and I know this is a very simplistic version that I kind of did in like a day before I kind of came here, being Japanese, maybe I picked Toyota just to, but like 1,000 samples captured over like 2 hours and just put into a word cloud. This took me probably something like 2 hours in field and an hour to create this page. But sometimes this type of insight is required, and it's not clean because I just literally used the word cloud for it. But sometimes it does help some of these quick decisions. And we can argue that, is this legit? Is this quick? But in the moment when someone needs an answer yesterday, sometimes we do need to kind of be comfortable with what we show. But the job of us researchers when we do things like this, the quick and dirty, as people like to say, is to make sure that the realization of what's the dirty part, right? What are the things that you're trading off for time? And how do you read something like this does need to be part of our educational role, or the expectation setting role with management, with business decision makers. You're not going to make a huge business decision on this. This is based on just 1,000 samples. This was done on a Thursday, therefore you don't have the real people that work from Monday to Friday that answered this, but it does provide an indicative direction into some of the things people are talking about. And then, management hears words like AI, machine learning, that we did, A/B testing, let's test it on the website, they think. But how do we use this? And I do think that the role of the researcher in terms of educating the business decision makers, business units, R&D divisions, and potentially even finance division people to really understand the fact base and also set expectations of what that fact base provides, but also what it doesn't provide is becoming more and more important as everyone has easy access to data. I don't know how many times I've tried to stop a client or even my internal people saying, let's just throw something on SurveyMonkey and launch it. And they believe, and then they use that page to pieces, right? And I'm like horrified at the whole thing. I'm telling, no, this was just based on 2 days. You can't use it to that extent. I think we've all been there. But it does become our job as everyone can access, consumer research today. The third point about really going to design thinking is I do think it bends on this theme that we've been hooking over, especially today. As you know, we talked about for instance, in Ajax, how you have the Scrum meetings of having multiple people in the room, and also the discussion from Baron on Deleuze, where you have different types of research and also futurist or trend research in your teams to actually create insights. It does become a very iterative, not just sequential, it's not linear, so it's very iterative. So there is the whole, this is the Stanford D School kind of framework for how to do design thinking, but start with empathize, you define, and the define becomes so important because otherwise you run into a whole cycle of iterative rotations without knowing what you're searching for, but really defining what the pain points, what are the things that you want to solve for, then the ideation and the collision, garages, whatever you call them, the co-creation and the ideation of the potential ideas, and then just prototype, test, prototype, test, prototype, test. And I think the Singtel retail example showed that you can do prototypes pretty lively this way, but how you actually manage the prototype and then test and then learn, which is actually not included, right? You find out what you found out what you found out was wrong, and then you try again. So the whole art of prototyping and testing is something that I do think as qual researchers we have the ability to lead and should take an active part of. But time is money and time is constrained. And I think one of the key elements of really designing quant research, design research, whatever you call it, insights to action kind of schedule is really that the whole industry is now under pressure to really be good project managers because of the time difference. I'm probably usually thinking, someone comes to me and saying, hey, we need to do this project in 10 weeks and we've already agreed with the client. Can we do something? And my first reaction is no in my heart, but we do need to find ways to go through this. So typically, like this is literally the time schedule that I had for a product development project because they were under pressure to deliver a prototype and get a pilot out in market within 10 weeks. This was more due to business timelines, retail timelines, competitive intelligence about something was happening. But literally, it's more like we have ethnographies, and then we plan the design garage on the parallel. We build the first prototype. We have the garage sessions. There's a rapid quant that does concept testing in the middle, and then we have prototypes, and then we have the IDIs to keep refining. And even talking about it gets me tired all over again, but this is the type of sometimes urgent situations that clients are facing, and we need to abide on them. And at the end of the 10 weeks, if it is like a digital project or a very, very small physical project, the thing does end up live somewhere. So, it's a big enough risk to make sure you want to manage this, but the art of maneuvering this is something that I think the project management element becomes a little more complex and times strained as we go on. And so it comes to the story of the Scrum team or what we call a fully loaded team. The collision needs to we need to have the power as project managers of a research effort or an insights effort rather, to get to insights to action effort, that we are involving the right stakeholders from the beginning at the right time. And it's more than co-creation, it's like just doing it together as one team. One of the more important things I find when we structure these teams is we do tend to start with research teams or working level teams. And the PL owner is updated on the process, which usually gets the PL owner, whether this be a business unit division manager or a head of certain category or even the CMO. The moment you start getting this into a reporting mode, they are becoming a little more critical. And especially with qual research, they'll start saying, but isn't that N equals whatever. So I think that getting the person on board from day one is pretty important. You do need the industry experts to put a little of the sanity check of what reality actually is. The trend researchers and futurists we find very valuable because they may not be based on facts today, but the small super users that are running new things, with time moving so fast, the future is not that far away. So we need to actually look a bit forward, even if it's not as factually based as some of the traditional qualitative research we do. The designers, we've had situations where we onboarded them later, and it was tough because they don't get the whole immersion process. Them being there and understanding the financial objectives, even though they are designers, so they don't need to fully run the economic model, but they need to understand the pressure of the client and the industry at stake, so for them to design well. So involving them from day one also pretty critical. The qualitative researcher of the physical things, but also the quant researcher, product UX designers, digital programmers, all of these people are on the team. I often find counterintuitively that having the finance person join some of these early focus groups or ethnographies actually does help get them to join as allies and not as enemies who are managing the budget pretty well. And maybe this doesn't go out of this room, but these people never get invited to these fun events. So they love it when they get asked to join a focus group, and sometimes they're the most proactive when they're reading the insights. And they actually do pretty well because they also are conscious of the profit and money efforts, so they do take some pragmatic views. And obviously the data science, analytics, the digital side of things often takes a view, because while you're doing this, you also want to be checking your customer data to see if certain trends are happening. It's a big team, right? I mean, it's a lot of people. We have also discussed within McKinsey of how to run these integrative teams, because people come from different views, different ways of thinking, different ways of working. Output means different things to different people. The analytics person will want 5 days to crunch that terabytes of data, while as the design researcher will be perfectly fine stating something with n equals 1 ethnography and keep iterating. So the management of this mode to push the thinking forward needs to lie on someone's hands. Sometimes it lands on McKinsey hands, but I think the qualitative researcher, because we have the flexibility to touch a lot of different elements, would be critical in this. The last point, talking about the finance person that never gets to join focus groups, one realization that I have from the last few years of experience on talking about qualitative research with management is we should not underestimate their appetite to learn about this. We often think that they're in big rooms, they're very busy, they have 15 minutes to get updated or 30 minutes to get updated, so we want to be short and concise and show them 5 key, really good PowerPoints. I don't think that may be the way that you always do it, but they actually love the immersion element, and not everyone, but a few of them really love joining the groundwork. The observe together. So I have actually invited the whole board membership of a certain financial institution to hold their board meeting in the back room of a focus group room. And they had their board meeting after the 2-hour observation. And the CEO was just like talking his head off and like, oh, that guy in the suit or that person, whatever. And that led to a very, very different discussion of the project meeting versus the one before, which was a PowerPoint presentation of the previous focus group. And because they never get to see these things anymore, they actually react more positively. So observe together is actually a pretty key component. This very quick and dirty 1,000 comment word cloud is not very pretty. It's not very clean. But I have shown this type of format in some proposal presentations, saying it is very short, it is 2 days worth of work, but we wanted to get your thoughts and let's discuss within this discussion about how you read this. And their reading of some of these results, once they get to understand how a word cloud is formulated, which means the more words you get, the bigger the fonts become, they start really reading depth, and you get so much information from them through their read that it has provided a very beneficial element to immerse or cooperate in a very integrative kind of way. So I would not be afraid to put something slightly messy, but also leave it to interpretation, co-interpretation. And then lastly, thinking together. I think the beauty of the design research that we have today is you bring a lot of these elements. We do quant research. You bring almost everything in the room and you lock up the stakeholders, including some key management, for 3 days to really go over the results. And I had enormous success in setting up something like this. So as you see, this was a setup that we had, but we had the presentation area, or maybe here. We had work tables where we had C-suite people and VPs, doing sticky notes and thinking of ideas. But we also had to make them feel safe, that they're not just relying on a couple of ethnographic groups. We did have the quantitative output there, so that they could look at some industry numbers, trend research, industry spend data, user quantitative surveys that we had also done, so that they had that to reference to. And the mix of quantitative, and then we had ethnography areas where we had the personas and journeys, and we had people over 50 trying to figure out, why does a 20-year-old persona look that way? Like, looks nothing like my daughter, but your daughter is very rich too. So we had these conversations, but it allowed for a lot of immersion. And then we had ideation tables where people would just, go and leave ideas. And actually, the more executives, because they became successful for a reason, right? They have really strong appetite to grow a business. They were very active in participating. And I think that sometimes we are too afraid to ask executives to really immerse in these kinds of conversations because they've got so much on their plates. But when we think about the impact of innovation, brand research, this is especially for marketing executives, this is the baseline of what their revenue is coming from for the next few years. So it is usually worth their time. And so I think taking the courage to just ask and invite, and I was actually afraid to invite a few people before as well, but now I'm a full believer. So I know my theme was qual quant design, and I know I've kind of gone all over the place. But my last comment is, like, looking at the various wonderful presentations over the 2 days, I think we have so much data, we have so many different methods, so many new ways to do things, but also the old ways are still relevant. And the art to curate insights, creation, to impact the companies and the organizations that we all work for is going to be a key driver for us to become successful as a research community together. So I'd just like to leave you with that thought. Thank you very much.